When you are. All right, welcome everyone to the June 24th, 2014 Shakopee City Council meeting. Ms. Wilson, there we go. I got there. I'm on autopilot. Ms. Wilson, could you please call the roll?
Certainly. Counselor Whiting.
Here.
Counselor Luce.
Here.
Counselor Mokel.
Here.
Counselor Lehman.
Here.
Mayor Tabke.
Here. Please all stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item number 3, approval of the agenda. Do we have any additions or corrections to the agenda this evening?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have several additions to the agenda. The council members will find on the table. 4B, approving a lease agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation. 7A has been added related to the recent stormwater issues that have been taking place in town. That moves your other agenda items down one each. 7F, regarding a transfer of our cable franchise. And 7G, regarding a special event in the downtown area.
Perfect. Anything from council? Entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Councilor Lehman,
Motion to approve the agenda.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilor Mokel. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 4, consent business. Any items to remove or add to consent this evening from council? Entertain a motion to approve. Councilor Whiting.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a second by Councilor Lehman. Ms. Wilson, could you please read the consent agenda?
Certainly. Item 4A approves the application and grants a temporary on-sale liquor license to the parish of Yoakum and Ann, or St. Mark's Church at 350 South Atwood Street for July 25th through 27th, 2014. 4B adopts resolution number 7461, approving a lease agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation for park usage.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on those items? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Item 5, recognition of involved citizens by City Council. Is there anyone here to discuss an item that is not on our agenda this evening? Anything? We've got a super fun agenda this evening to go over. All right, seeing none, move on to item number 7, workshop discussion for 7A, June 19th, 2014 stormwater event. What we're going to do with this is Bruce Loney, our Public Works Director, is going to introduce the item, talk about what happened, what went really well, what didn't go so well, and if there's anybody in the audience who'd like to discuss some things. We won't have in-depth discussions this evening, but we will hear if anybody has anything they'd like to talk with us about, if there are issues that we need to go over and discuss that aren't previously mentioned by Mr. Loney. So, Mr. Loney, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the audience. I did put a memo on your table, did prepare it today, so I know you may not have a chance to read it, but the gist of the memo is to go over what happened, where are our major problem areas, and what are we doing to resolve some of these. As you would know, in the morning of June 19th, we had, from most accounts, at least 5.5, 5.3 inches of rain. Most of that occurred within a 3 to 4 hour period. And that would be classified anywhere between a 50 and 75-year flood event, just based on rainfall, but because of the super saturation that we've been experiencing. If you read the papers, we've had over 21 inches of rain since April 1. All the ponds and wetlands were full in the drainage district of everywhere that we had, in my estimation, almost 100% runoff in most cases. There was a tremendous amount of water. We've seen water in areas that we've never seen before, and we've seen it in volumes that we've never seen before. That is from attesting from many people that I've talked to who've lived here all their lives. So anyway, this map that I have here kind of shows the major project or the major problem areas that we need to do some follow-up. The first one here, and I'll point, is the Burling Drive and Thistle Lane area. That did some flooding of the intersection. So we need to check out our upper valley. Yes, next one here is Patterson Drive area. again, water overflowed the channel and did get close, go right by a house. We need to fix that. That is in our 2015 CIP that you'll be seeing shortly as a project for next year. The big area that we had problems with is in south of Valley View Road. We have two drainage channels. One, I call it it's by the Conkey residence, comes down the hills. It gets so full of debris that it plugs up the pipes. The pipe can't handle it, then it flows down Valley View. It did go through our emergency overflow channel, and it did, as far as any damage, I was not aware of any. So it did work. But we wanted to look at that to make that structure more, how do we get the debris from clogging up that pipe? Down here south of Valley View Road on Independence, a vast majority of this water came out of the channel, flowed to the north, and overcharged our emergency overflow channel that we have in that area, also overflowed Independence Drive, overflowed Greenfield Park, and into the Wyndham Drive residence in the back of those drives. Significant amount of water went into that area, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The other two big ones is County Road 16. The culvert is somewhat plugged. Water's flowing over the top of the road. We're losing trails. We're losing we're losing the road. Basically, the county's gonna have to do something there. The last one here is Boiling Springs Lane, which there's no outlet in there. I have negotiated an outlet back in 1996 with Savage so we can bring water into there. The residents have never really shown an interest in having an outlet there, but the water is right up to the residents and into their septic systems. This is Patterson Drive. Here's the house I'm talking about where the flow is. We need to fix that. You can even see the debris of the amount of water. The water of this channel overflowed the roadway, Patterson Drive there. This is that pond I'm talking about in Boiling Springs Lane, completely filling up in this area of houses in the backyard. We're pumping it as we speak. We've been pumping it for 5 days. This is the water, this is quite a bit reduced flow going to the north, heading towards Valley View Road. It's coming out of the channel. And there's the channel, and it overtops right here. We'd like to berm this up higher if we can. We'll talk to the property owners, and that's some of the fixes we'll talk about, and bigger pipes. This is the water, then it comes out of the field, floods Valley View, goes down an emergency overflow here, but then it reached such a peak, it came down Independence Drive. This is County Road 16, and there's another view of County Road 16 and the plugging there. So the memo I put together talked about what we're gonna do. The main area of interest, the main one that I think caused the most problem was here in south of Valley View Road. And again, what we had here is this water is supposed to go to the east into the Blue Lake Channel.
Could you
It
zoom in on that?
overtops.
Could you zoom in on that a little bit, Bruce, for us?
Sure. Is that
Thank
about
you.
right? Is that good? So it comes down, and there's several hundred, probably about 2,600 acres of land that drains into here. So a significant amount of flow comes through here. A lot of wetlands to the south here, and a very steep grade here. So when the water comes out of those wetlands, it's coming down here, pretty hard to pond it. Generally speaking, this area is so sandy during the summer months as we watch other rains, it would soak into this area. It never really got to Valley View Road. In this particular case, again, the soil is super saturated. It did not hold the water. So the water came flying through here, and again, 5.3 inches in 4 hours, we had a flash flood. I came to town, I remember at 7:30 that morning, and checked a lot of the specific areas and didn't see many issues. But by 8:30, we had significant issues. That's how quickly the water did come up. So it overtops this emergency overflow in this area in Pheasant Run going to this pond, and then it came down, overtopped the road, came down Independence, came into this pond area, overtopped, and came into Wyndham Drive area. Significant water flow. It was too late to do anything by the time we got there. We just had to keep the drains open. This water goes into backyard drains, goes into this pond, which overflows into this pond, which goes into the big 54-inch pipe all the way to Mindup ponds. What we're attempting to do, we're gonna talk to the property owners here, can we put in some bigger culverts, some berming here, get as much of this water to the east in a temporary interim condition. We also look at seeing about putting an emergency overflow pipe through the mined area. We'll go talk to the mine owner, see if that's a possibility. Again, this takes time, takes permission, and it takes getting a contractor in there to do the work. We have met with some of the property owners in south of Valley View. They seem amenable to doing something. They recognize they like to have a better flowing channel. It's affecting their crops, as well as, you know, their livelihood down there. So we probably will be putting in the 2015 CIP a project to do a project from 83 all the way back to this area to pick up this water and get it over there. But that's gonna take some time, some coordination with Scott County, some coordination with the SMSC, and quite a bit of design work. But we might be able to put some bigger pipes in the driveways and some berming to give some protection better than we have today. And that's what we're working on right now. And I know Councilor Luce came with me, and we met a couple of property owners this afternoon. So with that, I'll take any questions you may have.
Can I, just so everybody understands what was in this area particularly, which affected Wyndham Drive. So first off, all the water was supposed to go to the east.
Yeah, and I just want to add one more thing, Mayor, real quick.
Mhm.
You did commission a study, I think it was in March or April, probably in April, or earlier, because we've always had this problem in the winter. So we're trying to look at what can we do to help that problem. And what we found is that this channel can really only handle a 2-year storm. Then it overtops because of the culvert sizing, because of the channel shape. It's a very narrow channel. So we need to kind of contain that water and get it over to 83. That's
Got
what
it.
has to happen. And the study will be coming back to you pretty soon. We just hadn't finished it yet. We're in the process of that study and bringing it back.
Got it.
So that is something that we have found with this flow of the channel, taking cross sections. It cannot handle much flow before it comes out.
Perfect. So first phase is the water should follow that channel to the east. Second is it will soak into the field that's there.
Yep,
Third, should go into the emergency.
right here in Pheasant
And
Run.
then there's so much water that what happened was it went
And
down
this- and
Independence.
this is the fourth.
Okay.
First, it'll soak into the field. And then if it doesn't soak into the field, it's gonna go into the channel.
Right.
Well, that's what comes off the hill though, so.
Right, right.
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, Bruce, when this all happened, I was out and about looking at some of this stuff and met up with you on Beerling Drive and looked at the issue that we had there. And I wanna say I appreciate you going out and taking a look at some of these concerns that were raised. But I guess for council, I was thinking, as we develop out into the township into the future, we're gonna have to figure out how, as development happens on the bluff, we're gonna create more runoff, and we're gonna see the same type of situation. So I guess what I'm kind of thinking about, and I really don't wanna get into it in detail, it's more of a long-term strategy planning, is how do we deal with developing the bluffs, creating more runoff with impervious surfaces, and not, it's gonna be an oversizing issue, I'm sure, at the bottom of the bluff as we develop further. But I think now is a good time to put that in place for the future.
That's a good question. And the answer is, right now, we have no restriction coming down the hills in any of the development, in the undeveloped areas.
Right.
With development, a requirement is 0.1 CFS per acre runoff rate. We're gonna greatly reduce the rate, and they are required to infiltrate to meet MPCA standards. Development may actually reduce and control the runoff rates better
Okay,
than it is today.
good, okay,
So as we develop, we're gonna actually have better stormwater management
okay.
than today. Not that I'm encouraging development, but
We know what you mean. Councilor Whiting.
You had mentioned that some of the grates got clogged up with debris and things. I know we've done some work in the past few years cleaning out some of those mucked up areas. Do we have a process in place to regularly do that job of getting out there and cleaning up those storm water runoff areas?
Yes, we do. We put together a comprehensive stormwater map and plan that talks about hotspot areas. And all the hotspot areas are supposed to be checked regularly for cleaning before and after a storm, so that we keep those key areas that are flood prone, keep those open and clean. So we do that on a regular basis. Now, some of the areas that we're talking about, I'm talking about up in the hills, you got all this deadfall and you get a tremendous rain. And we know what they are. The guys are dispatched right away during a storm. They're told, these are the areas you have to check. And they monitor. We had guys during that morning of June 19th, we had guys stationed at various points to watch to see if things continue to flow like they should, or if there becomes problems. But that is a danger in wooded areas. You're gonna get clogging.
That was my follow-up. Do you think because of all the amount of rain that we ended up with more debris from other areas that we weren't watching, or?
Yeah, we did, but when we monitored the drains, they were working. The drains were flowing pretty good. Now, they get a little bit of clogging, we get in there and clean them out, but for the most part, except for the one on Valley View I talked about by the Conkey residents, that one there plugs up routinely, and there's another one, Joni Schultz, but there's so much wooded area and steep slope, it just comes down, it can plug real quick. And those driveways down in here, and the O'Laughlin driveway and Schneider driveway, we routinely go out there and clean them, just to make sure they're open. Because the amount of water can push some tree limbs, plug them up.
Thank you.
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, I think Councilor Whiting brings up a valid point, because I'm thinking as the event unfolds and the water is flowing at such velocity and so much water, you really can't at that point jump in there and clean it. You can't ask somebody to jump in there and try to do something about it when the water's raging. It's kind of unsafe. But so the question then is, how do you prevent the stuff from washing down the hill and plugging up whatever it is we designed? So we're gonna have to figure up some kind of a design that takes that into consideration and, oversize it to the point to where it can be half restricted and still meet capacities or something. That's your department. I'm just talking because I don't know what I'm saying, but
Well,
You're making us all aware.
I don't
Well,
wanna,
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't wanna, overall, system worked pretty good. I mean, there's not a city in the metro area that doesn't have some flooding issues. I'm not making light of the things that happen on Wyndham Drive or anything. I'm just saying, in a storm of that magnitude, with the water running, yes, things can happen. That's why we try to always put in emergency overflows, because the pipe may plug. Look at County Road 16 right now. That's a real mess. You got a 20-foot high dam sitting there right now. And if that gives way, we got a real mess coming down those homes over there. So those are things that we watch out for, we try to avoid, but there's no way I could stand here in front of you and say we're gonna always never have that happen. It just can't. You just cannot do that. Storms are unpredictable, and the magnitude is, we try to predict them, but we can't.
Can't guarantee no more 5-6 inch rains in 3 hours or
Nope.
something like that.
No, I can't do that.
It's just disheartening to see somebody's basement underwater. It really is.
It is. I mean, we try to, I think we have a pretty good stormwater system, but we do have to monitor it. And I have to credit my guys. They've dealt with garbage carts, they've dealt with tree damage, they've dealt with storm. Now we're dealing with flooding in the Minnesota River and sanitary sewer issues. They've been under the pressure the last 4 weeks. And I think they've performed pretty well.
Can you tell them thanks for all their hard work and
Yes,
efforts from us?
absolutely.
We appreciate it.
Yep.
Any other questions from council? All right, I know we have a few folks in the audience that'd like to speak. If you still want to, come forward. If there are any issues we can address, we'll discuss them if we can this evening. If not, we'll make sure to note it and figure out what to do in the future. So is there anybody wants to come up? Maximum 5 minutes. There's a sign up there for name and address. if anybody would like to. And then just when you get done signing in, make sure to state your name and address for the record,
right,
if you
sounds
could,
good.
sir.
So my name's Rob Runchi. I live on 1869 Wyndham Drive, which is right on the corner of where the water came in. And my only question is, I know we're talking about preventative measures and what we're going to do to stop this in the future, but what do we do when it happens again? And I know you said you showed the picture of the pump at somebody's house. We didn't see, I mean, there was a pump that came for a little bit to our house or across the street, but then after that, there wasn't really, it didn't seem like a presence from the city to try and mitigate what was going on. I know one of my neighbors actually bought his own 2 pumps and pumped out their whole backyard. So on the backside of Wyndham, he actually bought 2 pumps, pumped it dry, so it protected all those people's backyards. Then he came down and we started pumping it out of my backyard. So my question is, just in the future, do we have some plans in place if something like this does happen? Do we have an emergency response for it? Do we have the pumps in place to do this for us if it does happen again?
Mr. Loney, this one we can look at you for.
Mayor, members of council, right now, I mean, we are looking to get some pumps. We actually burnt out a pump. We had the pumps working on Boiling Spring, but the amount of water that was over in that area was so tremendous. By the time we got there, it was nothing we could really do except keep the drains open. And I had people out there kind of monitoring the situation, but we do need to buy some more pumps. That's something that we need to do, and we're looking at that right now. I mean, some bigger pumps, the ones that can handle some major flow if we need to.
And something like this, where do you pump it to? I mean, because everything is going to trying to go to the same place. Like, how does that effective? Is it work, or was it just the fact that it went down the storm drains because it finally stopped running off of the park at that time, or what?
But that's a thing, we can look at in the future. If we had, set up better, the water was already so overwhelming, it came in there. It was kind of like, it's there. The damage is probably done. In the future, if we could get it quickly enough, we could probably string some hose and pump it to another district. For instance, in the area of Wyndham Drive, if we could get enough pumping there, we could string a hose and get it into what we call the Park Meadows district, put it in there. But that would take about 600, 700 feet, maybe 1,000 feet of hose or whatever. And the longer the hose, the harder it is to pump any significant water. But those are things we can look at, be better prepared for the next time.
Perfect. Councilor Lehman?
Sir, what was your name?
Rob Runchi.
Can I call you Rob?
Yep, go ahead.
Is your house located directly across from the park on the corner?
Mine's the second one in.
Okay.
So I had water up about 1.5 feet up my windows in my
Right.
basement.
Right,
And then
okay.
so.
And I've got a great video that I'll share with council. I don't want to play it in public because some of the words that I was saying on the video probably should be replayed. But anyway, I was out there looking at that, and my understanding of Wyndham, because if you go back about a block and a half, the water goes the opposite direction.
Right.
And this block and a half goes toward the park.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently if my understanding, and Bruce can correct me, it goes toward the park and goes back behind the houses and down that channel.
It meets right in my backyard. There's
Behind-
a big culvert in the backyard and
Right.
a 100-year grate
Yep, and
in my yard.
it's supposed to drain back behind there and go
Right.
somewhere and not back up and flood out your basement.
Right.
The corner house, now, if them houses could actually have pumped up about a block and a half, it would've went down a drain and went north.
Yeah. Or else we actually thought, this is afterthought, but pumping it just over the berm, pumping it right into the gravel pit.
Sure, yep.
Because when I got home at whatever it was, 11 o'clock, it was just up to my windows.
So that's a discussion we need to have with the
Just a
Shock and
potential
Gravel to see
option
if
in the
we can do
future is
that.
all.
Obviously, it's private property, we'll have to ask them if we can do that, but
Yep.
that's a good alternative.
So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have anything you were going to add to
Well-
that, Bruce?
The only thing is, just so the area we're talking about, so we're clear, right in here is Thrush and Wyndham, right here. And all this, these storm sewer, or the catch basin here in the backyard catch basin, everything goes to this pond over here in Wyndham. And then it overflows into this pond, and then it goes to the MnDOT pond. What I was talking about before, next time we could get a pump in here, we can get a pump in here quick enough, pump it into this district, and it would go into this pond system. But by the time we got there, the water was so overwhelming, it was like, I mean, it was a river.
Cause you were pumping, is that what you were trying to do?
Yeah.
Pump it over there?
Yeah. And now, next time we get permission from the mine, so those are things we can look at in the future.
They don't make a big pump big enough to move that amount of water.
No, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, that's the,
That amount of water, if there was just some backyard flooding, we could pump it out, but it was
right.
a tremendous amount of water.
Anyone else have questions or have a story they'd like to share? A letter they'd like to read? Anything? All right, if not, I have one more question for Mr. Loney. I've been getting a lot of questions about the presidential streets and water in the basements and those types of things. Is there any, I have a bunch of folks who've been saying it's especially on the streets that have been redone in the past few years. And I keep trying to tell everybody that it's the wettest year we've had on record. And I don't necessarily know if it has anything to do with the streets having been redone, but I just wanted to get your opinion on that, or if it's very specific instances or how that all works.
Mayor, members of the council, I mean, I can check it out further, but I can tell you I've had several phone calls. I've never had water in 30 or 40 years of living here. Our sanitary sewer system has a lot of clean water going in the system right now. That's some I&I. That's water that's probably piped into the sanitary sewer system from, foundation drains or whatever else have you. We don't know. We're checking that out. But all I can say is we put some drain tile, we dug out those streets. A lot of them had bad soils. We put 3 feet of sand in. We put drain tile in there to pick up any water. We should have been able to help the situation, and I know my own secretary has water in her basement and she hasn't had, but there was a little problem with the sump pump. But there's water, yes, there is high water in that area. But again, we had 21 inches of rain in 2 months. Never, the most water in history. Now, so we're in a historic event period. I think we need to take that into account. We'll continue to monitor those situations. We'll have people go out there and double check them. But again, we can check our drain tile. The drain tile is working in the street. That should be helping the situation. But if you've dug a house, if you just think about it, you've dug a sump, especially in clay or silty soils, and somehow the water is getting in there now.
That's Lehman.
Mayor, piece of information for you. I learned that the utilities, Shakopee Public Utilities has a test that they can actually take a sample of the water from the basement, test it, and tell if it's their drinking water or if it's groundwater. Very simple test, very quick and easy.
Yeah.
So
And
they're looking for the whatever they're putting in the water, whether it's the fluoride, chloride. or
Chlorine.
whatever. Yeah.
Test for chlorine.
Yep. So they've been doing that for some of them up in that area, and didn't know they could do that. It's a great idea. you
Right.
know.
I was amazed when they told me that as well, and it's
Right.
to check and see if it's city water that's leaking for some
Right.
reason, and that's
Right.
what's causing the issues in basements. And
Yep.
John Crooks told me, I think it was 16 of them or so that they did on Friday alone, and they didn't find any. I thought it was fluoride that he told me
I think it was
that
fluoride.
that they were looking for, and they didn't see any in any of the basements. So that is good. Well, we commend you, and especially all of your staff and all the hard work that everybody is doing there. Public Works, public safety for the police department, the fire department. I know everyone it's been a rough 2 weeks in Shakopee and all over, and we really appreciate all the hard work everybody's putting in. It hasn't been perfect by any means, but overall, vast majority of the times it's working out really well, and we all appreciate it, and thank you all for your work with that. Yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I just had one question and I'll sign in here. My name's Christetta Barini. I'm with the Shakopee Valley News. And I was curious as to what the decision was behind not calling a state of emergency. What's the city's threshold for calling a state of emergency, and how close were we to it or not, for that matter?
That would be Jeff Tate.
That's, the chief is behind you there. He'll help with answering that one. Well, we got the chief
We may have a state of emergency.
Gotten a treat.
My apologies, we have it turned off now.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, Scott County did declare a state of emergency, and we've had this question come up a couple times. In terms of why we didn't, frankly, and this is with all due respect to everybody here that's had their issues with their basement, we were doing just fine. We were not in a state of emergency where our current staff levels and the equipment that we had couldn't keep up at that point. What a state of emergency essentially does, and in this case, the mayor would have signed it, and I think he would have signed it. It would have been good for 3 days, and that would loosen all the restrictions in terms of contracts, working with contractors, any equipment that we need to procure in order to manage the event. Essentially, you're delegating all of your authority to the emergency management director to run the city for the next 3 days and make sure everything, there's a continuity of operations moving forward. Jordan, I don't think did one. I think the only city that did one was Belle Plaine. We do not need a disaster declaration to apply for federal grant fund or FEMA reimbursement funds. Technically, the county wouldn't either. So we are monitoring all of our expenses, and we are going to hit a threshold countywide where we'll be eligible for some reimbursement. And it'll be a while before we know what that is until the waters recede and we really get a handle on the amount of damage in Shakopee. But in terms of, it is a judgment call in terms of when we do it, but you know, Bruce and I talked that day with other staff, and again, he alluded to it or said it very clearly actually. This water came so fast, there's no way we would have been able to go out, rent pumps and get it all out before any of this happened. So we were within our capabilities. And frankly, there was no need. There was nothing we didn't have that a disaster declaration would have gotten us, that we absolutely had to have in order to move forward. I hope I answered that.
I think so. Any questions on that?
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
well, it's my understanding that, well, first of all, I mean, there was individual discussions between council members and mayor and so on and so forth about this issue, and with the chief. I talked with the chief myself. But my understanding is it doesn't preclude us from taking advantage of, if we find that there's significant damage after the water runs down, that we can fall underneath the emergency that's already declared by Scott County, because we are part of Scott County's lower jurisdictionals. So it would kind of be like a double emergency, I guess, when Scott County's already done it for us, basically. We just fall in line with what they've already done if we see that the need is there, and once we know what the total assessment is. That's my understanding anyway.
I understand, again, it was an emergency in several people's backyards, but citywide, we had the roads closed, the barricades were put in place, and like it or not, we're kind of used to flooding around here. People got by and did just fine, and they're still doing just fine. So.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or anything? All right.
One last
Oh,
comment
Councilor
about
Whiting.
flooding. I just want to warn anybody that's watching, especially those with young children, to please keep them away from the flooding areas and the flooded 101 and things like that. I've seen a lot of children out there wading in the water, and I would just hate to see another disaster on top of what we have already. So please take note and warn your kids to please stay out of the flooded areas.
Exactly.
Current's fast and powerful.
Right. Perfect. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. We're going to move on to item number 7B. The presentation by Shakopee Tennis Association on the third-party assessment and analysis. And if the folks who are here for the flooding stuff, you don't need to feel obligated to stay for the remainder of the meeting, but it is a hoot, so you can stick around and have fun with us, just so you know. Thanks for being here.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm just going to do a brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to the Tennis Association that's here for you tonight. But back in 2012, the Park Board held a meeting with all of our associations, looking at what the needs of each association were. And at that time, the Shakopee Tennis Association came forward with a unique proposal to the city that they would like to look at building a 8-court indoor tennis facility somewhere here in Shakopee. And the site that they were looking at as a proposal is Schutrop Park site, which is on the corner of 16 and 21. So in 2013, in March of 2013, they presented that proposal to the Park Board and to the City Council. At that time, you reviewed the current, or not the current, this has changed quite a bit from what you will see tonight. This is what was in front of you in 2013, that they asked for your support for them to continue doing research on this type of a proposal. And with that, they asked if they could have a year where we would not do anything with this park land, for them to do a third-party assessment on their business plan, on this proposal, this financials of building this indoor tennis facility, and then they would come back to you with that results of that assessment. You did sign a letter of intent at that point for a year that we would not do anything with this park site. It's a little over a year now since then. We still haven't done anything with this park site. We currently don't have a particular plan for this 8 acres that we have here. But they are coming back to you tonight with their assessment and analysis. I just ask you as the council to listen to them and then direct staff on how we want to proceed. A couple of the comments that, or things that you should consider, is this site in general, what you think it might be used for in the future. If this is a proposal you think you still want to look forward and support, then what the Tennis Association's next step would be to start fundraising for this, and us as the city would have to look at what we would do with the land, how we'd work that out with the Tennis Association, what time frame we would allow them to put on it, that sort of thing, in agreement that way. So the other item is that this is, Schutrop Park is about 40 acres, or a little over 40 acres, the whole site. So this top part is about 8 acres, between 8 and 9 acres, roughly. We lost a little bit when County Road 21 went through. But then this is a steep bluff here that's heavily wooded, and then it's wetland to the north that goes down to Dean Lake. I did look through the contract when we did buy this parcel of land from the Schutrop family, and we bought the majority of it. They did donate a portion of it, and in the contract, that donated portion has to remain in public use. And that's 8 acres, so it's about 8% of that. I think it's 8%, I have it written down, but it's 8 acres it totals that we have to keep in public use, which is about the flat area at the top that is usable. So that's what is here. You will see tonight in their proposal that they've changed the configuration of this quite a bit. We do have, and Mr. Lenny will be back in if we do have any questions, but on the new proposal, you'll see in the packet that you have in front of you was a pond in this area that will be a joint pond between the county, the SMSC, and the city for regional ponding, which will help with the County Road 16 expansion in the future. And they have, the Tennis Association has put that into their plan. We've made them aware that this portion would be needed. And then we've also asked to keep a portion of this land for public park uses as far as a playground, shelter. But this would be a public tennis facility on parkland that they would run. They're a nonprofit agency. They will explain that more. So if you don't have any further questions for me as far as the introduction, I will be able to answer more questions as we go through. But I do have tonight from the Shakopee Tennis Association here, Kevin Hamlin and John Vandecastle, and they're going to do a brief presentation for you of what the findings have been and kind of where they're going from here. So, over. Do you have any PowerPoint?
I don't right now. Hello, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Kevin Hamlin. I'm a representative of the Shakopee Tennis Association. Previously, Mr. Dave Forbes, who's the president of the association, presented to you. Unfortunately, he got called away this morning to fly planes for Delta, so he was not able to be here. I'll be in his stead. We had 2 proposals done in the time over a little over a year. Apologize that it took that long. We hit a couple speed bumps, and we wanted to find someone that was has done this before and could give you kind of clear answers on this. So we actually did 2 different studies. We had a site study done, and then we had a financial study done. The site study was done by Mr. Rick Caro of Management Visions. He's out of New York City. He does these basically all across the nation. That's all he does is looking at sports facilities, usually kind of the more athletic club types, but also specific to tennis. That's his background. And so we hired him to do a site study. And I believe you have that in front of you. It's the Management Vision one. It's a 74-page document. I'm not going to go all 74 pages on you. Explain it all. I'm going to keep it as brief as possible, and then if you have specific questions, you can ask those. What he did, though, is he did a summary at the very beginning and kind of explains his methodology, what he looks at, and what he does look at is demographics of the area, and how he does that is he actually had us go out and measure, is it, yeah, 8 minute and 12 minute? Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little disheveled because I'm in the process of moving houses right now, so bear with me. But he had us go out and do travel distances from the actual site. So we went out 8 minutes to the north, to the south, to the east, to the west, northeast, southeast, etc. And then from those 8 minutes, we went 4 minutes more to 12 minutes. And on average, that's the amount of time people are willing to travel to these sites. And so the 8 minute is the primary market, the 12 minute is the secondary market. And within those areas, then he did demographic studies to see what the population was and et cetera. This was similar to a site study that we had done previously internally and we gave to you. This is done by a third party that kind of validates that. His conclusion, and I'll get into a little bit more after that, but his conclusion is this is very feasible. And that's actually the highest recommendation he gives. There's very feasible, feasible, not feasible, and I forget what the other one is, but very feasible is the top of it. He thinks this is a great site location for it. When looking for competitors in the area, he usually goes out, I believe 10 minutes or so, and we have none. And he didn't really believe us, and we took him around because he actually flew in from New York City, got to experience the cold weather that we had in April or March. That was he wasn't used to that, but, and he didn't realize, it was quite rural, and he thought, how is this going to work? But then he saw, we have 1821, Eagle Creek 21 there, and how it's located in an area that's perfect, that in the Southwest Metro, in an area that doesn't have tennis at all. And so you can go through in the exhibits, and he has the demographics broken down. I apologize, he's a little old-fashioned because he is quite old, and so some of the scanning isn't perfect on what he's done, and he didn't send us an electronic copy, so I couldn't get you a better version of that. I've emailed him and asked him, but that's just not quite how he works. So what you have in front of you is actually what I received as well. Some of the numbers a little hard to read, but I'm not going to go through all of them. It just has the populations, households, incomes, etc. And basically, with his years of experience, this leads up to a very feasible site location. Yes.
Kevin, you're referring to the 70-some page document. That's
Correct.
what you're referring to? Okay.
Yes. He used, if you're curious what resources he used to get that, it's actually Nielsen. There's basically 2 companies that give out demographic information. One of those is Nielsen, and that's what he used. So it's a very reputable in what you get in that information as well. He has a section on competitors. There are no competitors, according to him, within the radius of what he considers would be a competitor. And so there's really no information in there for you. It's not that we omitted it, it's just there's nothing within that radius that he would consider a competitor. Really, the closest one is Eden Prairie Lifetime. That's a membership club. It has high monthly memberships. On top of that, you still have to pay for court time. It's the highest level of Lifetime, so then you have to pay a little bit more than even if you're a regular Lifetime member. Outside of that, you have Fred Wells, which is public, but that's over by the airport. You have Reed Sweat, which is public, but that's north on 35W in Minneapolis. Baseline, which is part of the University of Minnesota. There's really nothing that's a public facility within this area for indoor tennis. And being a member of the USTA, I play in a lot of leagues myself. There is a lack of indoor courts. Nighttime leagues, adult leagues that I play in, we sometimes have to play 11 at night, Friday nights, etc., just to get court times to play. There is a demand for it within the USTA. I'm going to switch over to the other study done by Greg Lappin. Brief history on Greg Lappin. He's actually a Chaska resident. He actually started up the flagship in Eden Prairie, which is now Lifetime Eden Prairie. He also started up the Rochester Athletic Club. Both of those are very successful clubs that have indoor tennis within them. He's been a member of the tennis community for years and years. He's well respected. He's actually currently right now at Wimbledon giving speeches to members of the tennis community. Happens to live in our area, and he was willing to go over our financials, kind of input a little of his own. And so he did probably what's more interesting to you, the financial study of it. And if you go to page, let's see. Sorry, as I try and go through here real quick. I'm not finding it right now. I apologize. Should have highlighted this, but basically, he's. Oh, let's see here. Do you have it where his recommendation is? Thought it was early on, but I'm not finding it right now. Basically, his recommendation is this is a very feasible operation. That's if we come into this with no debt for the building, which is our plan from the get-go. It's what we presented to you from the very beginning, is we would raise the funds to build the building, not have any debt going into it, and then I'll go into a little bit more of how that breaks down on a year-by-year basis. But that's always been our plan, is to raise the funds ourselves through various means, and then build the building, and then go in debt-free with the operation. And I'll bring up John here in just a minute. He's going to go over kind of our new site plans, and then as well as we had a first estimate of the building as well that he'll go over. But the first part of the study, he goes over utilization of the courts, basically hours of the courts, how they would be used. It's not just you have people come in and they hit. You're going to have lessons from pros. You're going to have groups. You're going to have, during the day, you're going to have women's leagues. You're going to have USTA leagues. There's going to be a lot of programming, and that's how a lot of tennis operations work, and that's how they're successful, is you bring in programs, and you also have free court time for people that want to come in, but you have lessons, and you have group lessons. You have cardio tennis. You have a lot of various things that bring in different types of revenue. So he goes over court usage, percentages. Again, he's very conservative on his court usage percentages. Roughly, we're looking at 60% usage overall is kind of what he looked at. That's a very conservative estimate. They're probably going to be used more in the 80% range, but he just wanted to be very conservative in his estimates when he was going through that. He gave you kind of a basic breakdown of programming, membership fees, he has a monthly membership fee. We would not probably have a monthly. We would have a small yearly membership fee for certain people that would just give them added privileges, like they could in a week advance schedule court time. But this will be a completely public facility. Everyone will be welcome. And so our doors will be open to everyone. We'll just have kind of a small membership group that will give them slightly added privileges. And we've talked to the Parks and Rec, and I believe you as well, in giving the residents of Shakopee a slightly reduced membership fee for that, where they would also have that since it's as being members of the city. Let's see. On page 7, he goes over expenses. Again, he was, I would say, actually slightly higher on these, again, to be conservative overall, if you will. And so he adds those up. And then projected costs on the next page 8. He doesn't have the building cost on here, but John will talk about that. He talks about number of memberships, projected revenues. Page 9, he goes to projected expenses. And then on page 10, he has the overall, the numbers of the first 3 years. When we did our own internal study, we were extremely conservative as well. We had Eric Allen, who's one of our members of our committee, create that study as a CPA, also an auditor. He has lots of experience in doing this. His wife, Susan's part of our committee. She's a tennis pro, so she inputted how you schedule, what revenue you expect out of that. And we actually, even though Greg had kind of black number in his first year, we had projected a slight red number in the first year, but then year 2 and year 3, we would be in the black as well. And then on the assumptions there, he just kind of goes over some of the assumptions he has. So I just want to give a brief fly through on this. I don't know if you've read over it at all or not, but if you have questions for me now, we can do that. Or if you want John to give his presentation, then we can answer questions at the end.
I'd say let's go through the rest of it and answer questions at the end.
Drag this over. Help. I think I can just do.
I think it's
Drag this
slide it
over.
over, yeah.
And then just space bar.
Yep.
Or arrow. So, good evening, Mayor, Council. I work with Cunningham Group Architects out of Minneapolis, and I'm a resident here in Shakopee. I live right down the road from the flood on the higher side, thankfully. We gave this presentation to the Park Board 2 weeks ago, and it was approved by them to come here today. We looked at kind of what the Tennis Association's dream was, I would say, in this presentation. We wanted to show if you could pick exactly what you wanted to do, what would you do, how much would it cost? And that's kind of what this presentation is. We can go over numbers at the end, but at the end of the day, this is what the dream is. We can take a look at it.
Could you
This-
grab one of those microphones and pull it up a little bit for you?
Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
We looked at some initial planning and bubble diagram type of things. Is this laser pointer? Some little bubble diagram studies when we first met. I think the last go around that the city saw or the park board saw was this version of the one you previously of, how do you show this one? So this is what you saw tonight, which was a year ago. And now I go back. And this one down here is where it last ended up with the Parks Board. There was a pond that was requested, there was a play area that was requested, there was a kind of separate outbuilding, and then some extra area for park to remain with kind of reconfiguring how the indoor facility and outdoor courts would kind of be organized. We started with a simple structure that was based purely on the geometry of the courts. It's
a precast structure with bar joists. We would probably use relatively local Fabcon, which is just down in Savage, to be the supplier for the structure. We also looked at daylighting the courts in addition to the standard lighting that you have in a tennis facility. This is kind of a SketchUp model version of what it would look like from above. This is kind of the new overall plan. There's a kind of the entry into the site remains the same where it is. All the parking kind of is on the south side, which acts, and there's turnarounds for buses and whatnot, to this kind of central plaza area where we wanted to really eliminate any motor vehicle traffic. So kids that are running around inside that are going to go to the outside courts, we don't want it crossing any of that kind of traffic. It's also going to be utilized for outdoor events. When we get into the enlarged plans, this is kind of a representation of what the play area, the structure, and the pond area can take on any shape. This is just a representation. As we move into the enlarged plans, there's kind of a central corridor. So your front door is here, your main lobby and front desk is here. To the south, you have a retail space, which would be designed for a retailer to come in there and run, which would also be a revenue generator for the facility in monthly rent. We have men's and women's locker rooms. We have a community room space that's got kind of more of a prep kitchen type thing. It's not a full-blown kitchen, it's for catering to come in, something like that. If you want to rent it out as a party, it's also another revenue generator, as well as something that the general public can just go in and kind of check out. Additional kind of bathrooms for that core there. The upper level has 4 classrooms. Also can be rented out, one of which would be a computer lab. We have additional restrooms up here. And then we also have what most facilities don't, with the exception of the Baseline Center at the University of Minnesota, is actually a viewing deck that's elevated up over the tops of the courts. So you have kind of a viewing deck this way as well as a viewing deck this way. These are kind of shots from the street as you're approaching it. The parking lot, one at the drop-off, one from the tennis courts. And this is kind of this is one of the images that we'll be using for the fundraising efforts, whether it be flyers or billboards or whatever it may be. There's kind of a daytime shot, there's a kind of dusk shot and a nighttime shot, as well as one of the interior of the courts. What else?
The viewing areas of the kind of the lake area, Dean Lake, and
Oh yeah, the
channels.
if we go back, these kind of outboard kind of, we call them breakout rooms. In education facilities, they have these little breakout rooms that they can have meetings or whatever. This is overlooking, this would be a vision glass type piece down there as well as out here. So one would be looking out over into the field and one would be looking into the woods.
Actually overlooks the lake too.
Overlooks
that
the
you can
lake.
see.
Yep. If there's any questions on that,
Go ahead.
do you want to go through the?
Yeah, you can do that briefly.
Sure. Do the estimate.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you. And we just drag this guy over here. This is really tiny. So we contacted Mortensen, and they came up with a pie-in-the-sky number to do everything. We talked about phasing things out, and you can kind of see in here. If I can just zoom in a little bit. So phase 1 would be kind of the big box, the precast structure with all the courts, as well as part of phase one is all the locker rooms, everything kind of in that back kind of red bar area that was on the rendering, your front entry, your upper level, all of that sort of piece. Phase 2 and 3 are still part of the front building, we'll call it, whole, but they can be phased out as well, depending on how the fundraising goes. So there's the education wing, which has the community room below and the classrooms above, that could be a phase. The retail space could be another phase. And the plaza, there's gonna be somewhat of a plaza to open the doors, but to do the entire plaza and then do the outdoor courts, all those things can be phased out, and they've added contingencies, they've added fees, estimates, pretty much anything you could possibly throw at, they've come up with. And then you can see down at the bottom, if they did all the phases consecutively year after year after year, it would be whatever it is there, 16,500,000 roughly. In phase one, we're looking at about 13 million for that initial phase to open the doors. Again, these numbers are the pie in the sky dream. In order to do a facility like this, we did a little research on what the baseline center at the U of M, because it's a similar structure, but there's actually 2 facilities in that building. It's much larger in square footage, but it's similar. It's, I think, 2 courts larger.
Yeah, and they
They
have
have-
Ritter Arena, which is the ice, sorry.
Sure.
They also have Ritter Arena there, which is the ice rink, for the women's team, I believe. That's attached to it as well, so that's the 2 buildings he was talking about, so.
It's one larger structure with 2 functions in the same building. And that building was built in 2001 is when it opened. That was a $20 million project. And with the amortization of which Mortensen is using here, they're using 4% a year. So if you add up $20 million 13 years ago and their 4% increase every year to get to this year, that same facility is, if you took it and cut it in half, let's start there. So if it's a $20 million facility 13 years ago, half of that facility is tennis, so we'll use $10 million 13 years ago. You add that 4% every year, compounded, you're at almost identical the number of the all-in number here at 16,000,006. So we know this is a legitimate number, and this number is only gonna go down as the design tightens up, as square footages get more resolved, as funding starts, they'll realize, well, we really have a budget of, we think we can raise $10 million, or we think we can raise this whole $60 million right off the bat, depending on who the donors are. It's something that is as high as it will possibly ever go. All of these numbers, as it gets tightened down, as program gets more defined, is gonna go down. This is the absolute dream number. If money was no object and this is what you wanted to build, this is what it would cost. Anything else?
Sounds good.
Okay.
So if you guys have any questions, feel free.
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, I've got a couple of questions. The contingency amount that you've set aside on this project in your estimates,
Yep.
where do I find that number at?
If you go down to, I can see it in here. So they're using, I believe it's 7.5%.
Yep.
It's right down here. So they have it, at each phase, they have a 7.5% number. And then as you go out, so if you go out phase 2, not only do they have insurance and fees and their 7.5% contingency, they also have the additional 4% for construction inflation
Okay.
at
And-
each one.
All right, Mayor, my second question is, how does, and this might be for city staff, but how does, any tennis programming, Shakopee Tennis Association, how does that coordinate with this program? Where'd she go? There she is.
Councilor Lehman, members of the council, the tennis association currently right now has just an outdoor summer program, so they use the 8 courts that we have up at Stans Park. Before they build their outdoor courts, I think they would continue to use those outdoor courts as well as using the indoor facilities. Once they do that, future phases of building those outdoor courts, they may use both sites. It depends how much the association grows. I would think that we would use a lot there, but we would have those courts still for the public to use as well. I don't have the exact number of how many kids we currently have in tennis this year, but
Record year this year, I know.
Okay.
And I don't
I
have
can
the
get you
numbers in
those.
front of me.
I can get you the numbers. Each of our associations have been growing, so hopefully with this and with this interest, it would continue to grow. One thing I wanted to add that we've talked about over the last year when this came to the park board multiple times as well as city council is that I see that the city and Parks and Recreation Department specifically would do a lot of joint things with this group and this building being in the location of the east side. One thing that the group has talked about is, you know, getting some senior programming out at this site with that community space that they have, and then trying to incorporate those seniors with younger generations to do a multi-generational thing. Also working with the school district on the computer lab and getting some of the kids to bus there, or working with them on getting transportation to this facility so that we could do some programming as well in their classroom space, or even within that parkland area or in that courtyard. But I think there would be a lot of joint programming going on between the city and this private organization that would be running this public facility.
Would that be in some form of an agreement
Yes.
worked out between this group and city? Okay.
Yes, that's what I
All right,
predict.
thank you.
Councilor Whiting.
I got a few questions, not one of my long ones, but
We'll see about that.
who would own the building if this failed? If it's on park land, and would the city be taking over this building, or how would that work?
That has been discussed. That was a big question a year ago, and Kevin can add to it too. Right now, the idea is that we would have an agreement for the use of the land, that they would pay us $1 or whatever we decide per year for the use of the land. It would be privately owned by the nonprofit organization. We would have to put into that agreement for the land what would happen if, you know, if they failed on this operation, that the city took it over. I know a couple of the questions last year were if it could be converted to indoor turf facility, you know, what that square footage would be. The configuration has changed a little bit, so we would have to work on that. But that, I foresee being all part of the agreement we would have to put together with those clauses in that, you know, if this were to not succeed, what would be required, whether it would be required of them to take the building down at their own cost or whether the city would take it over and programming it. Those are things we would have to consider.
I'm going to ask one question
Go
real
ahead.
quick before you go. What do you need from us this evening, just so we can kind of guide our questions that direction? Because if we don't need to talk about details now, then I don't want to. So what do you need from us this evening?
We are looking for you to give us your opinion on this project, if you see it's something that you can see as a city continuing to support. If you do, then we can start doing the research with the group, with our city attorneys on how we would begin to work out this type of an agreement, bring that back to you, but also would give them the opportunity that, you know, this is supported, that we could possibly start to put together our fundraising efforts, our fundraising plan, and, you know, begin moving that forward. Am I correct, then?
Yes.
Councilor Whiting, you can
Okay,
continue.
I'll direct
Thanks.
my questions a little more towards that then. I am concerned that I think the diagram had changed a little bit, and we have a lot of acreage there down by the lake in that natural area. And I'd like to see, you know, I think in the last configuration that we saw, it had a patio off the back and possibly some access down to the natural area at one point. Maybe I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
I think we should be able to access that and utilize that, and also include that in the parking, that it's a public parking space too, for people to access the park there too. And the other thing is on the monthly fee structure, it is you talked about, you know, allowing the city residents to have a reduced fee. Would there also be some use of that facility for other park and rec events? And would that be on a fee basis, or would that be free, or work together?
Sorry, I guess just could you clarify what type of events you're talking about, or?
Well, it could be just use of the gym part of it rather than an actual tennis program.
Well, the indoor area with the courts would be specifically for tennis. Tennis has specialized surfaces that, if used for other types of activities, can actually ruin the surface and not make them playable. And so, unfortunately, I don't know if it would be open for other uses in that sense. They have to be treated very carefully. They have to be resurfaced after 5 to 7 years. So it would that specific area would be just for tennis. When we look at the community center and the other areas and the outside area, that would definitely be something that we could work with and have the park and rec area and kind of cooperate with them in other areas in that sense.
Okay, good to know. Last question is that you have phase 2, you have the education wing in there, and I'm just concerned that that's actually one of the good things about this
That
building,
would-
and I want to make sure that that's
Sorry.
included in the process of getting, planning phase 2 rather than phasing out phase 2.
No, we would not. Yeah, that's how they've structured it. But we would definitely still. That's one of our main components is, and that's even in our name, the Shakopee Tennis and Education Center. Is we would have those education components still, even though they've put that in there as phase 2. That's one of our things going forward. Is if we build the building, those are going to be included in it. We may take back in other areas or other things that. Funding, if it's not quite coming as to what we expect, we take other things out of it. But those education rooms and the computer lab, et cetera, those would definitely be part of it.
Good. Thank you.
I can just add, the phasing was to see what each piece would cost, not that it has to be built 5 years down the road. This was more of a, how do we build it and what does each piece cost? And that's how they broke it down.
Sure, thanks.
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, I'm in favor of moving forward. Obviously, there's a lot to work out in the details of operations and stuff, and at some point, we'll get to that. I guess, Mayor, one of my concerns is at some point, I think we need to have a date certain that the fundraising is complete. Here's where we're at. We're either moving forward or we're not. I just don't want to see us going on and on and on for the next 20 years.
Yep. As soon as we get the okay, we're going to start putting a plan together. We've brought on someone new to our committee that is specific to that for marketing and other things. We're going to start putting marketing material together. We're just waiting kind of for the council to give us that okay that we can then begin that phase of it. We didn't want to go forward without the council's blessing, basically. So.
And then, Mayor, if I could follow up, then I think, in my mind, the next step, if council says move forward, would be for our staff and our legal folks to sit down and start talking about some of these issues that Councilor Whiting has addressed with the land and the building, if you were to go insolvent or something like that, and these types of things, because if we can't come to an agreement on that, well, then we're kind of stuck.
I agree with you on that. The other thing I was going to mention briefly is that we're expecting about 18 to 24 months for the fundraising is kind of what we projected. And I think that would be, once we started, if we can't make it at that point, that would be our cutoff, and we'd say, you know what, apologize, but, so we have very favorable outlook for it, the fundraising, and we have some leads in that, but we're predicting kind of the 18 to 24 month period, so not like a 20-year period or 10-year period, so.
Okay, I appreciate the comment.
Any further questions?
The answer, don't mind.
All right, perfect. Let's put this in the form of a motion for support for the project, or however someone wants to make a motion. Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, I'll make a motion to move forward with the proposed tennis court public partnership on the Schutrop Park property.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
Second by Councilor Mokel. Any discussion? Councilor Whiting?
You want a time period on this motion? Do you want the 24 months to, or just come ahead back with your information from your lawyers?
Yeah, we wouldn't be ready. I mean, that would be from the start of fundraising, and we still need to talk over the agreement with the city and the city attorney and everything like that. So I wouldn't want the 24-month clock to start exactly right now, if that's all right with the
Right.
council.
Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, and that's why I brought up the first step is not necessarily the fundraising, it's gonna be for staff to figure out how to do that, programming issues and the legal technicalities, and if we can't agree on that, then they should be fundraising.
We have no plan for the park right now anyway, so.
Well, and if we can't make an agreement on how these technicalities are gonna worked out in some kind of a legal, master agreement,
Don't raise money.
they might not be raising money for something that's not gonna be
Right.
going.
Councilor Luce?
Yeah, we just don't want this thing back in our lap, you know. If they can do it the way their plan is, I applaud you 100%. I think the
win-win.
building is beautiful. Everything you've talked about is right on, and hopefully you can pull it off.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly. I think it's an extraordinary project, and like we've been saying up to now, that it's a really good project for the tennis association, for the community, and if and when it comes to completion, will be a really great amenity for our entire community and the region. So it's a wonderful project that we're excited about. Councilor Luce?
One final comment. I know you've put a lot of work into this. I know Dave Forbes, and he's been working on this for years. You've done a very good job, and I hope you can keep it through and see your building built.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Councilor Lehman?
the other discussion item I had for council on this was, Councilor Whiting brought up the fact that we wanted to be able to utilize some of that parking with access to the natural areas. If that's the majority of council's wishes, then I guess that would be just a direction to staff to work on that in the discussions. Staff might have comments on that.
Yeah, we will definitely look into that. That has been part of our master plan. When 21 was built, we did bring the trail underneath 21, and there's a big loop right now at the base of the bluff. One thing with discussing it with Mr. Loney for future plans is we have a big challenge with how steep the bluff is along that park property. So we may, if we bring a trail through there, maybe have to be some switchbacks, or we may have to come up 21 and then come in the top part to wind it through. But yes, we would try to connect it somehow.
Could
We'll
we-
look into that.
Could we trail over to 21 down and then back over? And
Potentially,
follow
yes.
that existing trail that's already there, going back toward the Dean Lake project?
We have that built
Potentially.
into our
Okay.
Close this one.
Apparently they have something.
Back.
Sorry, Mayor, we're back in the details.
We are back to the details. You do a good job of that. so-
Apologize.
trail coming.
Apologize.
So this is the trail that runs along 21 right now, and we would bring it up closer to the corner at the parking, and you can run right in there.
So it's already there. Okay, very good.
Perfect.
Yep.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We appreciate all of your hard work. It's a great thing. All right, item 7C, 2015 budget process overview. Ms. Linehan.
I got this picture again.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm not going to talk about flooding or garbage pickup, but we are going to talk about the 2015 budget process. Happy days. See, I bring a little jolt of light to your night. This is a really interesting budget year. What I wanted to bring forward tonight was a discussion of the uniqueness of this budget year, the items that we're gonna be dealing with. I realize we have two new council members who have not been through a budget process before, so I wanted to start this early, get input and direction and your thoughts and your priorities before we start this process. Before you is a memo that we talked about annually each year. We bring a little bit of an update to the council early on. Fortunately, this year, the legislative session was actually completed on time. There have been years when they're still in discussions and we're starting our budget process, so fortunately, we are past that. Several council members recently attended the League of Minnesota Cities annual conference. We received the legislative update, the new laws, and soon to come will be the League's budget resource guide. These are all tools that we work with as we prepare our budget for discussion with the department heads, the staff, and ultimately with the city council. One of the issues this year that is unique, again, is the discussion of the property tax levy limits. They are not in effect this year. Last year we dealt with that. This year we do not. The interesting perspective on that, it is also a year, as you saw in the information provided to you, that Scott County, specifically the city of Shakopee, is experiencing value growth. What this typically translates to is you can experience increased revenues at the same time through a tax levy increase, at the same time your market is growing. The impact is not as onerous as in prior years where you've had market value declines and you are trying to raise a levy, and it's, in layman's terms, no pun, Mr. Councilmember Lehman, a double whammy. This is a really positive year to be bringing forward property tax discussions because we do have the benefit of growth, and Shakopee's growth is very positive. We haven't received the real final numbers yet. You may be aware that recently there has been work at the county level when there are appeals and just basic questions about people's values. We're still waiting to get more updates on that, but it was a significant number of requests this year. The other factor that is going to impact our budget, not as much as it did last year, but at least the wording is a little clearer, sales tax exemption. As we discussed last year, for many, many years since the 80s, cities paid sales tax on almost all purchases. Last year it was defined that sales tax exemption, first blush, was across the board. Wrong. Sales tax exemption was extraordinarily difficult to determine, and it still is. There's been some changes that will now impact starting January 2015 that will change how we are able to plan for sales tax for what are called the private sector type of fields that we are in, whether it be the community center, whether it be any type of work with a fitness center, things that are oftentimes viewed as private sector. That being said, there is still discussion underway of certain areas that were not clearly addressed, such as joint powers and things like that. But we are hoping to get a good discussion and more updates from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. As those come in, we'll work on that. 2013 and 14 budget years both added personnel to your budgets. Those were factors that were discussed as we came forward with planning. What are the priorities of the council? What are the factors that you as a council want to make a get it done mode? And certain positions were added. What you will see in the 2015 budget is those positions will now be funded for full years. So that will have some impact on what we're looking at. The preliminary work papers that will go out to council will allow for the positions that we have added. When the personnel discussions begin with council, we will also provide to you any requests that staff may have for new council, changes to the status of the positions, any changes that would be required due to changes that they're aware of in retirements or other items. So all of that detail will also be provided to you. One topic that I think you are probably all really happy when I bring up is the whole issue of budgeting for debt service. We'll once again talk about that this year. As you're aware, we have not issued any debt in the city of Shakopee since 2010. There are, in very, very near future years, some debt service needs that will fall off. Last year, we took a big jump and brought the 2006 A debt service to a specific levy. That will be brought forward again, and we'll take a look at where we're at cash position-wise with all of the debt service needs that the city has. One goal, as we've talked about, and you've seen this recently, is the issue of how do we improve our debt rating. That's one issue that will be very good for the city. It's an item we're working on. I've recently gone to several sessions, and that would be an important factor if we were to consider issuing debt again. Part of what will be a discussion point in a rating call is how do you fund your existing debt? How close are you to paying off debt? Each year as we move forward, we get closer. One other important component as we prepare for the budgets is also the capital plans. both the capital plans you hear from Mr. Loney for the infrastructure and the capital plans you hear from Ms. Polly for the parks. Those will be brought forward to you in July. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, Bruce. We haven't had a chance to talk about this. He's been a little busy. And we will be bringing forward to you a detailed 5-year plan. And just in a summary, you will also receive 5-year plans on the equipment needs, the internal service IT, the building and facility plans, the park and the infrastructure capital plans in details, and all of those will be reviewed with you from a standpoint of significant changes. I think the one piece that I can address Councilmember Lehman is I understand how important it is to you as we move forward that we don't have those huge spikes, that we deal with infrastructure, that we deal with equipment needs, that we deal with these internally funded options and try and keep it consistent. In most cases, we've been able to do that. There have been issues that have approached and hit us with some unanticipated needs, but we typically have been pretty healthy. The transfers last year that were discussed and approved by council consisted of just a couple of major items. First and foremost was the $750,000 transfer to the capital. This year we'll be asking that for $1 million. The other transfer is a transfer to an EDA, and that is, yes?
Can you explain exactly what the $1 million capital improvement transfer is
Certainly.
for and why that's important now?
Certainly. Those are dollars that fund a significant portion of the 5-year, and it would be the current year of the 5-year plan, capital improvement fund for overlays, reconstructs, different projects that are undertaken, such in this year you're seeing Veerling Drive and those types of things. We have not typically dedicated a levy that's called capital. It is part of the city's general levy and it's transferred over to the capital improvement fund. That has not historically been in place, but it's been a piece that the council has worked diligently toward, and it's working. The fund is in a strong financial position. It allows you the discretion to take on the workflows that you need. Does that?
Thank you.
Okay.
That was perfect.
All right. The economic development area is a topic that I think you will be addressing in many times due to personnel, Main Street projects, initiatives that are in place, whether it's the improvement loan programs, whether it's issues with abatements and TIFs, other economic development requests. This would be a major part, I believe, again, of your 2015 budget planning. Those are pieces that, as we are in a growth mode, thankfully, this is an area we can talk about, and I think we will have a lot of information. One piece of information that I've recently received just earlier this week from the League of Minnesota Cities is a really interesting ranking of where Shakopee falls in as far as its value, its tax rates. I'll be routing as much detail on that as I can pull up to give you hopefully enough information to help you see a little bigger picture of where we fit into a really complicated world. The other part of the transfers will also be the transfers to the debt service funds, and we will have greater detail for you as we move forward on that issue. I think one of the more complicated components of this year's budget is you are facing a lot of requests from a lot of entities, both internally and externally. Whether it's the recent discussions you've had with the school board, whether it's issues you have been dealt with tonight and community groups that are looking possibly not for financial support, but looking for some type of support. The recent meetings you've had with SPUC. There are so many entities and so many requests and so many projects that you are facing a lot of difficult and complex decisions. The city is in a strong financial position. That is a really good position to be in. But I think it's very important as we move forward and gear up for this budget. We're going to be routing out work papers here shortly to the department heads. We'll be meeting with them, talking through the factors that we have. We're just finishing up personnel cost estimates and trying to allocate departmentally, where do the costs go? What are we looking at in insurance estimates? Those kind of factors that we provide. But also, we'll be putting forward detailed requests for their capital needs, their training needs. You've recently worked on goals and initiatives that as a council you want the city to focus on. Customer service, training, providing the tools, working with components that will meet the needs of the city right now. I would request that as a council, if you have very specific concerns and items that you'd like addressed, please talk to me, forward information, discuss with your department heads. We are here to meet whatever items you want to make a priority for this budget. And we will work diligently to bring this to you. There's a calendar we'll be putting out in this week's activity that will give you an overview of, we start our projects in June, and the whole budget process goes through actually all the way into December, from when we initially approve the preliminary levy, which this year will be September 1st, which means we'll actually be pulling this together in August. The preliminary levy, if I can remind you again, is the highest you can levy. You cannot increase your preliminary levy. That's the most you can levy to the approval of the final levy at a December meeting, and then that is certified to Scott County. Are there any thoughts, questions, concerns, anything I can provide to you as a council to help you with this complicated process? Otherwise, we're just gonna keep moving and say goodbye to summer, because we're gonna be budgeting.
Do we have any questions or discussion items from council at this time? Councilor Lehman.
Well, my concern with the spikes wasn't just on the internal funds, it's on the actual tax rate itself.
Correct.
So as values are coming back up, my hope is that the tax rate works its way back down. It may not get back to where it was, but ideally in my world, the values go back up to where they were, the tax rate goes back down to where it was, and the new properties add new revenue for new services.
Correct.
That's the perfect world,
Correct.
but doesn't include 5 inches of rain.
No, and it seems it's been an interesting budget cycle because we are dealing with issues that honestly, as council and community, you haven't dealt with a lot of these issues. This large growth in commercial industrial, this massive impact from different seasonal and other impacts. You've got just a lot of issues that as a group you haven't dealt with. And it does require some real prioritization and thoughtful analysis.
Mayor, if I could
Councilor?
make another comment. Years ago, the intent of not designating a capital levy was that it's unallocated as a transfer, which gives you options as a council. You kind of know going in that you're going to use a chunk of this to go over here for this, for the
Right.
capital fund. But if you have more, or if your capital needs change, it's flexible. Where if it's an allocated, it's kind of put there and left there, and it's not usable for other things, or as easily usable for other things. So I like the fact that we still have that flexibility. I think it's a good idea to have that for council. And the city didn't get in a good financial position by overburdening itself with debt. It didn't get in a good financial position by making too many promises, too many good opportunities all at the same time. And sometimes you have to say no, even to some very good things. Or you have to plan them out in succession.
Prioritize.
Exactly.
Big
So,
word in budgeting.
Budget's always a good time. It's my best time of the year. I enjoy it.
Wow.
Right next to a flood.
Or garbage hauling.
So I do have a couple questions.
Certainly.
The goals that council has approved and the directives, how are those flowing into your budgeting process? How are you utilizing those? How will they work to make the budget process more clear and easy, hopefully? And how can we help with that?
Well, one of the items I've been working on, and I haven't been ignoring you all night, but I'm crafting through the memos that we send out to department heads, is updates to them on what council has recently done. What are the actions that we're going to talk about in department meetings? How do these departmental budget requests, how do they flow into these council goals? How can we really point to these and bring that information back to you? I think that's going to be a significant factor to help you, I think, determine, has the staff done that to bring that back to you? So when you approve a levy and a budget, you actually feel that those specific priorities and defined goals are going to be met, not possibly in 1 year, but as we start laying the groundwork, how do we do that? But
Thank you.
I can
makes sense.
pretty much guarantee you we'll be keeping back and forth in touch on that a lot, because I think a lot of what we deal with is somewhat vague and somewhat obtuse, and you're dealing with budget estimates, and it just takes a lot of communication back and forth.
Perfect. Any other questions? All right, do you need anything else from us
I
at this
just
point?
wanted to get an update to you on where we're at, because this process actually goes on for over 6 months.
Yay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great job. We're going to move on to 7D, early retirement incentive. Ms. Wilson.
All right. Are we done with this lovely picture?
Yes,
Turn
please.
mine off.
Okay, there we go.
I thought it was a good focus for the buddy.
Depends on if it's flowing in or flowing out, right, Julie? All right. Mr. Mayor and council members, I'm up here somewhat in a related vein to what the finance director was just speaking to you about. And that is, as we have had early discussions about the budget for next year, as well as the goals recently established by the city council, the city administrator and I have come to the question, would the city council support the offering of an early retirement incentive to an eligible group of city employees? We believe that there is a contingent of employees out there that would entertain such an incentive and might be interested in it, might be a win-win for the employee and the city, and has the potential to create some opportunities within our organization that come with open positions and turnover and fresh perspectives and that come in with new people. So that is kind of the big picture question for you tonight. If you'd like to get to the detail of what such an incentive might look like and who might be eligible for that, I do have kind of a starting point available that we could discuss. It's certainly not the expectation that you're going to authorize a plan tonight and I'm going to run out and start offering it to employees tomorrow morning. This is kind of a preliminary discussion. We're looking for the general interest in the council in doing something like this.
Could you give us the framework of what you're thinking?
Certainly.
Like just the concept?
The concept usually has two components to it. One, you ask who would be eligible for the incentive, and then you ask what would the incentive look like? What would those people who are eligible and take us up on it, what would they receive? So those are the two questions generally that would need to be answered. And the city of Shakopee has done this one other time in my tenure here. And at that time, we were specifically approaching it from a budgetary standpoint, looking to have positions open up and then eliminate the positions or leave them open for a indefinite period of time. But in general, a program might look something like this. I've got a whole 3 slides, so not long. So, who would be eligible? As a starting point, I would suggest that you look at full-time employees with 25 years of service or more to the city. Our current ranks of employees go as high as 40 years of service. We have several people above the 30 years of service mark. And then secondly, a second group, so you would fall into one or the other category, would be employees with 15 years of service to the city who are within 5 years of full retirement age. If that were your eligibility, you would be looking at a pool of roughly 15 full-time employees that would read further down and ask, okay, what is the incentive? So And just as a point of reference, the city has 137 full-time employees. So, this is a little bit hard for me to pinpoint exactly because employees' eligibility for retirement depends on their total service in the public sector in Minnesota. So our employees who may have years of service with a neighboring city or jurisdiction at some other point in their career, I don't have immediate access to that information. I know how many years of service they've given to our organization, but I don't necessarily know how many years they have on our pension fund. So that's why I say roughly 15, and I don't have an exact number for you.
Chris, do we have a succession plan for these 15 employees? Or would we be opening up a job and nobody would know what they're doing?
No, part of doing this in a planned way is to allow for better succession planning rather than a 2 weeks notice and then somebody with many years of historical perspective and knowledge walks out the door. So part of the value of doing it in this way is to create a planned and structured departure for people that do hold important roles in our organization. So.
Do you want to get through the third slide first?
I can certainly do that.
Do you want to go through the last one?
You
Let's go through the last one and then
Okay.
we'll ask a lot of questions.
And then what would they receive? We, here the other time that we've offered this during my tenure, as well as in instances where we have eliminated positions through restructuring, the city has offered a combination of a certain number of weeks of pay on some formula and a certain number of months of health insurance. So it generally takes those two forms. You've got Part A, Part B combined to make the total package. Part A related to health insurance, we generally try to structure so that it can go into a tax benefited plan for that employee's use towards medical costs moving forward. Plan B tends to be a direct cash payout and is subject to taxes, and so there's some loss there. My suggestion to the council as a starting point would be a health insurance contribution valued at $1,020 for every 2 years of service. So if you had 24 years of service to the city, you would get 1 year's worth, 12 months worth of health insurance contribution. The $1,020 is what we currently pay towards two-party health insurance, and for many of our employees nearing or looking at retirement, that tends to be what they're on as opposed to family health insurance. It's much more common frame. So that is not full health insurance. There's still, even at that contribution level from the city, there is currently and would continue in these folks' case to be an employee share. And then 15 weeks of pay at the employee's current rate. You'll remember from my previous slide, the threshold to even be considered for this is 15 years of service. So we're looking at a week's pay for every year of service, but then capping that at 15 weeks. As I mentioned, we have several employees with 30 plus years of service, topping out with someone that's got 40 years of service. So that is what something like this might look like. The funding source for a program like this would be the city's compensated absences fund. We have on hand, should the unlikely situation occur that all of 137 of our employees depart on the same day and we have to pay out their unused vacation and sick leave and our obligations to those individuals, we have the cash on hand to do that. Obviously that scenario is highly unlikely to happen. So the finance director and I believe we have sufficient funding in there to fund a program such as this and still comfortably meet any unexpected departure obligations that might pop up in the coming years.
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, one of the concerns I have, don't we have two different types of retirement eligible employees? Like you have fire, for instance, can't they retire at 20 years, I think it is? Or police, I think is 20. And
It's
then
more based on age, and that's why this specifies years of service who are within 5 years of full retirement. And what's full retirement depends on which plan you're in. Our employees fall into one of two plans. They're either in the police and fire plan, which is our licensed police officers and our active firefighters, and the coordinated plan is everybody else, including the civilian employees in those two departments. And they do have different retirement ages. And it can also vary depending on when you got in the plan and when your service started. If you started before 1989, you have one threshold. If your service started after that date, you have a different threshold. So that's why it would be phrased the way it is what is full retirement varies based on at least those two circumstances.
And then, Mayor, my other concern, just at first look at this, is potentially if we did this and we had, we could have a very large pool of very experienced folks leave at the same time, which kind of leaves the city in my opinion, a kind of a vulnerable situation. I mean, I don't want to name names, but let's do a hypothetical. If we could go down a roster, you could have our planner, our engineer, not our finance director, but right, and that's not including some of our senior police personnel, some of our senior fire personnel, fire trainer possibly, and it's like if that was to happen, we would have not much experience left on the table, and it concerns me a little bit.
For reasons I'm sure you can imagine, I'd rather not talk about specific employees, but I have looked at who would fall into this eligibility criteria as best I can tell. Again, if they had service in another organization, they may fall into this pool and I might not realize it. The largest number of eligible people would be in our Public Works Department and in our Police Department, which is not surprising. They're our two largest departments in terms of head count. Fortunately, they're also, as our larger departments, the ones that have more cross-training. You know, in Public Works, we have 17 maintenance operators. And while we certainly have some that have very high years of experience, we have a strong contingent in that department of 7 to, I'm just gonna say off the top of my head, 13 years of experience. So it's not like the people left behind have just walked in the door, and like I said, the purpose here is to create some opportunities and flexibility for us as well.
Councilor Luce.
Wouldn't it be possible to put a cap on the number of people we would allow to go? Have a rating that those, you put it at 5 and the top rated one gets first shot and down the road.
Yes, it is possible to structure programs that you apply for the program and that there are review criteria. So once all the applications come in, you then review them and do some kind of, in the past, typically if organizations are approaching this type of program looking to reduce their number of staff, reduce their head count, they'll ask the question of, well, would the position have to be immediately refilled? And if the answer is yes, then your application probably isn't going to score very well because it doesn't achieve the desired purpose. So that is possible. I have to say, I don't see that as it's not one of my strong concerns. When I say there are, in the neighborhood of 15 employees that would be eligible under the parameters I outline, I would consider the program successful and a win-win if 3 or 4 of them accepted it and decided that this was a good fit for them. I would fall off my chair in shock if everyone took it. I just don't. And part of that is, I know some of our employees. I know who still has kids in school and who's talking about retirement, and the subject comes up every once in a while versus those people that seem like they plan to, work forever. So I don't personally, that's not high on my list of concerns of approaching this kind of plan. It would have, one thing I haven't mentioned, it would have a timeline on it. So if we reached a point where council said, yes, we want to go forward with this and authorized staff to, lay this out as an option to employees, it would have deadlines. Employees would have a certain number of weeks to consider what the council had put on the table and commit to participating or not participating, and then they would have a certain number of weeks or months to actually conclude their employment. And again, that gives us that planned, structured approach to planning for their departure and making sure we understand where all the files are and where, gathering as much knowledge from those people as we possibly can. So,
Further questions?
Is it
Councilor Lehman.
is it cost neutral, or it depends if we refill a position right away or if we restructure. Oh, never mind, I answered my own question.
Other questions? Are you going to answer this one yourself?
No,
All right.
I'm hoping not to. but How close of a turnaround can you get to get this program done, Chris?
If the council authorized doing something like this in July, we would likely see employees departing in the month of November would be my expectation. That includes something like 3 weeks to consider the options. There's a legal period to change your mind that we have to offer people. Once they commit, you still get 15 days to change your mind, and then a certain number of days to depart. So,
Any other questions? What do you need from us specifically? Do you need a motion just in favor or not in favor of the program, or how can we best help?
I guess the first question is the council interested in doing a program? And then, do you think that we are on the right track with what you've seen? Or would you like to see it framed up, differently? This is somewhat of an art and not a science. We are looking for that point where we have put a package on the table that is attractive enough to the employees that they see it as a win-win situation and that it achieves its desired outcomes. Yet from a cost standpoint, is worth it to the city and palatable to our residents and taxpayers. So we're looking for that kind of sweet spot here that again makes it a win-win if possible.
Okay. Anyone? Councilor Lehman?
Do we need to, there wasn't nothing besides a single sheet, so we really didn't have a whole lot of detail coming into this. How pressing is it? Can it come back at the next meeting? Can we sit down individually with staff, ask questions, and get some more details?
I think what we need tonight is just if this is on the right
Okay.
track. We don't need to approve these details by any means
No,
this
not
evening.
looking
What we're
for
doing
that.
tonight is just saying that this is something that we want to engage in, and if it is something we want to engage in, then I'm assuming in the month of July, a program would come back to us, or August, or whatever it would be, to be adopted by council.
Right, your business meeting in July, I believe, is on the 15th.
Mhm.
And so we would probably target that date to have a fully fleshed out program prepared for your consideration.
Councilor Luce?
Yeah, I've had discussions with a couple of department managers on this, and I believe it's something that we really need to do for the benefit of our employees and for the city. There's a few instances where things we can't, talk about on camera, but it would help out a lot on both sides. So I think we go forward.
Okay, are you gonna put that in the form of motion?
You can make that the motion. She just needs direction, I think, not a motion.
Well, I would rather have it in some
Motion?
motion form.
Motion.
Or Kathy and Councilor Mogul, anybody?
I would like to make a motion that we direct staff to proceed and come up with some more information on this, and that they plan on hearing from at least myself and hopefully others that are going to start asking some questions on this. But we need a little more information, but I would proceed right away.
With the program as in general,
As
it's
outlined
presented.
here.
Yeah.
And we can get more specific later.
Perfect. Do I have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Councilor Mogul, is that mostly clear, just that we
Yes.
have the intent of moving forward with what you've presented this evening?
Yes.
Okay, any discussion? Councilor Lehman?
Contact is Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilor Whiting, you had your hand up earlier as well. Did you have
No,
further
I'm
discussion?
good with the motion.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Louder.
You need a louder motion than that.
I make a motion to take a 10-minute break.
Second.
Second by Councilor Lehman. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We passes 4-1 with Councilor Whiting in dissent. We are in recess for 10 minutes.
That would be an unfriendly amendment. Good job.